When Moore's Utopia was issued with the idea that there was this mysterious island on this wonderful city, hundreds of people went to see captains to arrange for passage to this imaginary city. They felt that regardless of any other situation, they'd rather live there than any place they knew about. This led to some confusion, but gradually the pressure subsided and men began to realize that this utopia was an inner experience, something that man was seeking in the form of a hidden empire within his own consciousness. The next of these interesting utopian works was, of course, Campanella's City, City of the Sun. This was the work of a theologian, but it was well persecuted by religion for his efforts also to create the concept of a way of life which was harmonious to God and fair to mankind. Campanella recognized that ecclesiastical tyranny was no less than that of the civil courts, and that it was not much different whether the individual be dominated by the clergy or by the aristocracy. These, as you can well understand, was not particularly pleasing to the church, and it moved in upon Campanella and treated him pretty badly. But the principle involved was the same. This escape from domination also had to mean escape from superstition. It had to be released from spiritual authority, which in partnership with temporal authority afflicted the common man. So Campanella's City, City of the Sun, was also a rather theological community, rather suggestive in many respects of a well-ordered monastery. But at the same time, there was in it this desire of man to find practical ways of creating a solution to war, a solution to hate, a solution to fear. And in the beginning years of the 17th century, those problems which again loomed large in our thinking were beginning to really dominate the popular mind. Probably the smuggest, most delightful of the utopia is that of the German theologian Johann Valentin André, whose book Christianopolis was highly influenced by the culture of Switzerland. Of course, André was a devout Lutheran, and he could not for a moment support the religious convictions of Calvinist Switzerland. But at the same time, he admitted in some of his writings that he regretted that he was unable to accept wholeheartedly the Swiss way or go there and leave. Because in many respects, he admired it greatly. But out of his entire experience, he began to develop a more or less Protestant theological utopia in which, guided by the essential principles of Lutheranism, there was to be this new community dedicated to the quality and fundamental security of men. Luther, of course, cannot be blamed for André's concepts, but in its own way, Luther also, during his lifetime, expressed many of these same principles, and therefore Andre undoubtedly drew much inspiration from the writings of Luther himself. In this commonwealth, which Andre envisioned, there was considerable emphasis upon the economic state of man. The others were more of philosophical, more abstract, but Andre, who was much interested in labor movements in Europe, even in his own time, and was one of the first to develop a cooperative to take care of widows and orphans of laboring people. Andre was deeply concerned with a utopia in which everyone had the right to work, the right to have what he earned, the right to build a way of life which brought him personal security. And furthermore, if his industry was sincere and intelligent, that he had a certain right to the enjoyments of leisure and reading, of thoughts, and of general improvements of the mind. Andre did not unite with the popular mind that reserved all intellectual pursuits for a small group. And Andre's thinking, the good city, the city of Christ, was not only a wonderful community, but it was in substance a great school. It was a place of universal enlightenment in which individuals learned by living and lived by the learning, which they had gradually accumulated. So it was a kind of a city of proletariat philosophers, philosophers that were not scholastic or academic, but were thoughtful persons to whom security brought the right to be thoughtful, the privilege to think, and the mind could be relieved from the very great emergencies of daily existence. This type of thinking also permeated other utopian productions of that period. Now, this brings us to the subject of the New Atlantis, which was produced by an entirely different type of person. This work, in fact, all of the others included, seem to have risen from this idea of universal reformation of mankind. This reformation was the very pronouncement of all the utopias, that a new kind of life was opening for man. This new life was related somewhat also to the Western Hemisphere, to the development of a great new country where plantations could be established, where men could escape from the perils and mysteries of the old world, and building a new world, a way of life closer to the heart desire. It is very probable that the Rosicrucian manifestos, then the utopias, were both to a degree key to the development of Western Hemisphere. For here at last seemed to be an opportunity to break away from the traditions of the whole world and go forth in search of freedom of conscience, freedom of worship, freedom of opportunity, by which the individual could escape from the decadence of early 17th century Europe.